I'm Trisha Gupta, here to welcome all of you who are watching to the second of what's called the DIFF Talk series, a series of conversations with filmmakers and film professionals. And our guest for today is Chaitanya Tamhane, who has just confessed to me that when he made Court, he wrote it at 24, made it at 25, and was still a very, unfortunately bright-eyed and bushy-tailed 26 or 27 when it was sort of doing the rounds of Venice and Cannes and winning tons of awards. I will not list them for you. You can sort of go look him up on Wikipedia. But Chaitanya is here to talk about a film which is now 5 years old. He says that on the 17th of April 2015 is when Court was released in India. Is that an India release date? Yeah. And so I am going to be boring him by asking him about something that isn't top of his mind. But he says also, oh yeah, that's the other thing that's amazing. He just told me that this is the just before the conversation we had, where he told me he's not ever seen the whole film through ever since he made it. And well, I'll be asking you about that later. But maybe let me just start by asking the question, how, which you've probably been answered many times before, but bear with me. How did Court emerge in your head? What did you set out to make a film about when you were thinking Court?
For me, somehow so far it's always been the setting that's been interesting. It's never the plot. Like even with Court, the court case itself came the last. For me, it's always been the world, because I love researching. I'm almost like a journalist in that sense. I love doing interviews. I love being on ground and observing things. So it started off with a very silly idea. I used to be a big Bong Joon-ho fan, who's now all over the place because of Parasite. But I started with this idea, like, what if there was like a Bong Joon-ho-esque courtroom drama, where lawyers are not very sharp and they are not like very well spoken, and there's just a little bit of chaos in the courtroom. That's where the idea started, because I was watching some like silly American TV show, which was a courtroom drama. And I was like, oh, but this is too polished. This is too sophisticated, I'm sure this is not how it works in India. So I just decided to go to a lower court. And we always, again, in films, we generally see like the Supreme Court or the High Court. I was like, okay, let me go to like a lower court in Mumbai and just sit. And I'd heard that it's a great, piece of theater that unfolds in that room. And it was really, really sort of fascinating. It was really quite, immersive and interesting. And I had this thought that, okay, so this judge, he could be a relative or a neighbor of mine, who just happens to be in this position and who's casually taking life and death decisions and passing judgments on other people's life. That's where the idea kind of started. And then at the same time, I started, researching about what was happening with activists in the country, and, these charges of sedition, which are still like,
Well, we're still in the same month as the use of UAPA.
Yes, exactly.
Anand Teltumde and Gautam Navlakha.
And mind you, it was a different government when I was researching.
Absolutely.
So which is also revealing in a way,
Absolutely. These laws have not come to us from this government, and they're just.
These are colonial laws. Most of them are colonial laws being, misused and abused by these governments. But it's sad and revealing that it was a different government back then, but the same things were happening. So that's how the idea started. So I started researching about, activists and these arrests, and started sort of immersing myself in these different subcultures, that one get to witness in Mumbai if you're sensitive enough. And then slowly the film, the characters kind of evolved,
So when you say subcultures, you mean like the world of Narayan Kamble, the character, the
Yes, like people who are like who perform, but who perform songs or ballads, but they are activists, or they're trying to bring about a change. So that, and the lawyers and their personal lives, and and judges, and this whole idea of that they belong to the same society, their upbringing, their conditioning, their politics, their biases, their prejudices are all shaped by the environment that they have grown up in, which is the same for us,
Absolutely.
whoever's like, been raised in this society. And that married with the fact that there is a scope, there is room for biases in law, because a law has to be interpreted, a law needs to be interpreted, right? So it's not like an absolute thing, it's not set in stone. So all those things kind of came together with something very personal, based on my own childhood, based on my own memories of being raised in Mumbai.
Right.
And I could find that personal connection because, like I said, I felt like, okay, this public prosecutor who I find offensive in a courtroom could actually be my mother, or this judge could be my uncle, in just.
Were there actual people in your family who've been lawyers or judges? Is that a
No.
You mean it as an extension of
Yes. So that's how I could find like a personal inroad into the story. And I remember I was really stuck with the case itself, because I had a set of conditions about what the actual case should be and what it should not be, and what it should do and what it should not do. So I remember the actual case of the suicide of the manhole worker and the charges against Narayan Kamli. That was like the last thing that came to me. That's how I kind of, started writing the script after I solved that part of the puzzle. But all the scenes of their personal lives and the picnic sequence and all of that is what I had before that. But this kind of became like that glue that held it together.
So the particular case, so this is interesting. So let me stop you for a second to ask a question about, the things you're saying. A lot of what you've said is about the research that you did. Some of that is sort of, I'll call it ethnographic, like sitting in a lower court for a longish time observing. And some of it is embedded in a society in which we live, and we can all be anthropologists of our own worlds, hopefully. So that's one part. But the part where you're saying that the case, you had a specific set of criteria for what that case would be. What do you mean when you say that? How did you choose a case?
Again,
it's not a real case, or is it?
It's not a real case. So I don't remember the exact conditions right now. But that had to do with my aesthetics of storytelling at that point. For example, I didn't want it to be a straightforward case where there is some, gross injustice, that has taken place, and now we are supposed to root for this character in a particular way, or something that's going to make a certain section of the people very happy, and so I wanted something twisted in that sense. And I knew that the case is not going to be the main focus. The case is just a springboard, and we're going to go and into different directions with the case. I don't remember the exact conditions, but it had to do with my aesthetics of what story I want here, or what I want to communicate through the case, And I had to find a subtle balance where the case does not overpower the plot, where you're so interested in the case, where you don't, where going into the personal lives of these lawyers would be a distraction. And yet it's also the part which has some tension to it when you're inside the courtroom. But also there had to be room for the court sessions to be long and monotonous and boring.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I remember writing about when in 2015 I wrote about court for the Mumbai Mirror, which is where I write this column. I have actually written this column for 6 years. It is unbelievable. But I remember being very struck by the rarity. It's only when I watched Court that I realized quite how rare it is to see the interminable waiting of the Indian courtroom on screen, or anyone even try to get that texture of waiting, which I think is actually what really happens in court. I mean, courts are among the most boring, frustrating kind of spaces there are. I have a lot of lawyer friends, and I feel like they spend a lot of their time in that, agli tarikh, and judge kab aayenge, aur acha break ho gaya, acha adjourn, and you keep hearing it in this way, and things go on for a long period of time, which is not. So we receive that, we only receive the distilled judgment aata hai news, and we barely ever, unless you're a participant, you never really see. And I guess Hindi films, at least, and perhaps almost all commercial film traditions in India, have used the courtroom. Literally, that word comes together with drama, so you get courtroom drama, and in some ways the antithesis of that in court. And not to say that there isn't drama, but there is a certain very carefully, what can I say? There's a quiet. I mean, there's which is one of the most remarkable things about it. I was wondering, actually, it's something that you're speaking of, and I'm just interested in more. So I'm going to draw you out a bit more about this, because there is a way in which, when you watch this film, and from everything that you're saying, I can see that my guesses about how you went about it are more or less accurate. Ki there's an immersion in the aspects of the real world from which this film emerges, and yet, but there is obviously a decision there about fiction, right, and not documentary. So, for example, Anand Patwardhan's Jai Bhim Comrade talks about that, perhaps the same case of the worker who commits suicide, the manhole worker, who is at the center in some ways. Well, he dies right at the beginning of your film, but I wondered about the decision to make fiction. What do you think it does, fiction, to produce what court is trying to do, while retaining a certain kind of grain and detail, which is very much documentary?
Yeah, I mean, so even back then, I remember there was some feedback, that this is very documentary-like, or because there were long takes, there was, some feedback, did your theater background, impact your staging of these scenes, and for me, it was totally not the case. I mean, I love documentaries, and I don't mind going to the theater, but like you said, fiction in itself, or this whole medium of narrative fiction in cinema is a form in itself, is a language in itself. And I mean, it's easier said than done, but at least my attempt was to be consistent in my language, and to film things in a way which is appropriate for cinema, that they have a certain cinematic element to them. And because nothing is incidental, in front of the camera, it feels like, okay, people say, oh yeah, it felt like you've just kept the camera, but you worked so hard to create that, so everything is a decision, right from your casting to your production design, to how you light a scene, to where you place the camera, to where you decide to cut, the sound design, the presence or the absence of music. These are all, so there are so many small decisions you make to create that illusion. You know what I mean?
Of life.
Of life. Yeah. And because you are playing with the viewer's expectations, you're playing with the viewer's attention. And you're kind of, I'm not saying playing or manipulating in a bad way, even though films and filmmakers have that power through that medium. But you have to, I mean, you're communicating something with an audience. You're trying to create a universe, you're trying to create an atmosphere, and you're trying to communicate certain themes and your subtext, through the medium of cinema. So yeah, I mean, when we were making the film, we approached it straight up like a film, Yes, it's true that, I mean, I had certain standards for realism, let's say, or for what works for me and what doesn't work for me, what I would like to see on screen and what I would not like to see on screen.
Would you give an example of something? Is there something that...
Yeah, I'll tell you what. For example, for the public prosecutor's role, which was played by Gitanjali Kulkarni, we auditioned a lot of, like, for example, I love working with non-actors, non-professional. I love them. In fact, in my new film, I've gone all out. There's like almost no actors. I mean, court had Vivek and Gitanjali. Okay.
Right.
But just coming back to the public prosecutor, we auditioned a lot of non-professional actors, women for that role. But I came to the conclusion that this character is complicated in the sense that you see her in the courtroom in her element in a different way, and you see her with her family.
Yes.
Now, for both these things to be absolutely convincing, and real, I could not find a non-professional actor, a non-actor who would do justice to that. For example, when casting Veera Sathidar as Narayan Kamble,
he is himself a poet, right? He is a poet.
He's an activist. He is not a poet. He's an activist and a publisher. Yeah, but he knows that word.
Milieu. Correct.
He knows that milieu. But so we auditioned, I think about 80 or 90 real Lokshahirs, from across Maharashtra. And some of them could act but could not sing. Some of them could sing but could not act. Or some of them could do a little bit of both, but they didn't have the screen presence. Because you are casting for somebody who is appropriate for cinema.
And certainly see, these are the sorts of things that unless it's not there, I guess one will not know. Like the compellingness of his face, even when he's just waiting in a courtroom. There's a slight disgust in the way that he responds. It's not even spoken. The irritation when he's asked to take medicines many times. There's a certain I don't know, there is a certain arrogance, or there's a certain impatience, there's a certain sense that, and when the judge seems appalled when he says, I could have sung such a song. There's that moment in the beginning of the case. The non-obsequiousness, let's call it, like his refusal to be that person. Yachna karna nahi aata hai unko. वो एक है. So I can see why.
And that's the thing, it's like everything, at least for me, or as from what I understand, everything you do is a choice. Because if I try to be very real, if I try to be a slave to reality, it's not going to work. It won't work for me. You cheat in all kinds of ways. You cheat in the way you light something. You cheat in the way you do production design. Because ultimately, I mean, this might sound pretentious, but ultimately you're working more towards truth than realism. And because that truth is subjective, and because the truth is subjective, your aesthetics of how you try to go there is also going to be subjective. And you're going to make certain choices that another filmmaker or another artist would not make. Because there is economy at work. It's a 2-hour film. It's less than 2 hours, but you feel like you've lived a long time. So you're also manipulating time through your sound, through your edit. And you're handling different worlds. You're handling different themes. So there's ellipses. There's things I show you. There are things I don't show you. There are things which I kind of imply must have happened, in the time that has unfolded. So I mean, it's cool that it looks real or it feels like a documentary, but it's absolutely not. I mean, that's an illusion.
No,
that's an illusion.
That isn't what I was implying, but it was a question about that choice of fiction and what fiction,
and I guess I was back then I was fascinated by this idea of extreme realism. I wanted that. I wanted it to be as real as possible. Again, compared to that, my new film is still real in many ways, but it's more romantic in some ways. It's more cinematic in some ways. It's less documentary like. It's got more texture. It's got more, because that's also like a requirement of the story. Because then ultimately you're serving the needs of what needs to be communicated. You know what I mean? So the whole idea was to do something. How would it really be if you were in a courtroom? Because you've seen the film version of it many times.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of also what motivated that.
I mean, there is
I'm sorry if I've given you a very long answer to a very short question.
No. We absolutely are in the business of hopefully short questions from me and long answers from you. Hopefully. So you're doing very well at this. I was going to say that there's a kind of, right from the first scene where you see him teaching the children in the Vasti. And then it's not quite a classroom. It's kind of a classroom, but he's sitting on a bed and they're sitting on the floor.
Yeah, that's his house. Yeah.
And you feel like it's clear that they come always. It's regular. He says homework. So, but there is something about, you've seen classroom scenes perhaps also. I'm just thinking of other kinds of institutional scenes, like a school. And you see this scene, and when I was watching it again just now to have this conversation with you, jogging my memory of the film, I was thinking about that classroom scene and thinking, अच्छा classroom नहीं है क्योंकि वो bed पे बैठे हैं. But then he asks the person questions, one of the students answers, and there's a kind of, the choice not to inject any extra humor or extra pathos or extra, again, the word drama. New film being ready, and do you want to tell us a little bit about it, even though it seems like with the world as it is right now, there are very few chances that we get to see it this year.
Yeah, somebody told me that this has been the worst year for filmmakers to finish their films since World War II. But well, again, we can't really complain because, the world is dealing with so much worse and so many more pressing issues. So can't complain. Yeah, but it is a bit sad because I have a new film. I'm so excited to share it with, with the world, and I can't. I just have to sit tight. Like it's like sitting on a secret.
Yeah, it's a secret. It is. So what is not a secret is you're willing to tell us the name of it, and you're willing to tell us something about it. Do you want to tell people?
I'll try. Okay. So, I mean, so I'm one of those filmmakers who hates watching trailers where they give you the whole story. Yeah. I love like holding story elements. I want to give away, as little as possible about the film.
I am just fully with you on this as a fake film critic. Yes. I am very much more a film buff, and I don't like having things told to me. Wait, have I lost you?
Yeah, so it's called The Disciple. It's set in the world of North Indian classical music.
Okay.
And it's in Marathi. It's set in Mumbai. And we've cast like real musicians in the film who are acting for the first time. And what can I say? I've been very excited. It's like a coming of age film in a way, but again with a bit of a twist. I'm very excited. I just wanted to come out as soon as possible, but I'll have to wait. It's been 4 years in the making. It involved 2 years of research and writing, and then we did pre-production for a year, and then shot it, and then did post-production for a year. I've collaborated with some really good international artists and technicians on this film, and it was a very elaborate process, lots of moving parts, but I haven't seen it since I finished it, but I'm as of now I'm happy with the film. I'm really happy with the film. So
wait, how can you be happy with it without having seen it?
I saw it when I made it. I saw it when I finalized it.
Okay, fine. So, and that's true of Court as well. This thing you said about, so you mean you don't attend screenings with your eyes open? This is what.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to attend screenings at all. But I mean, you have to do the Q&A at the end or whatever. But generally, I'm just taking a walk around, at a coffee shop.
So there are just loads of details in Court that, I mean, these are almost personal curiosities. Like I feel like, I want like a little bit of like, why did you have that? And why did you have this? And I feel like I shouldn't kill the people who are going to be subjected to this conversation with that sort of thing. But I wondered, for example, so let me start with this. Let me try and distill it. I think for me, what Court gets, apart from the space of the courtroom or of the nature of the law and its interaction with the social, I think the column that I wrote, I titled it Extra Legal Understanding or something like that, or Extra Legal Circumstances or something like that, because I felt like it was about that interaction, which you've spoken of just now a little bit. But I wondered about this other thing, which I think is really special to Court, which is the consumption of culture, quote unquote culture, by all the various different characters and the ways in which the links between what people consume culturally and how they think, how we think, our politics and what is seen to be, just a play, just a song. So one of the most remarkable moments for me, and there are all these very, very small moments which are almost, they're sarcastic, but without it being voiced. Like when Vivek Gomba's character, the lawyer, the human rights lawyer who's defending Narayan Kamble, the Shahid, he goes to a bar in the evening. There's a singer there, and he's defending a Lok Shahir in court, whose lives and circumstances we've seen. And then there's the woman in the bar who I'm sure is actually perfectly lovely, and she sings quite well. But she chooses to sing a song, and she says it's, she picked it up from a street singer in Brazil. And there's something about that which is, you want to wince, at our lives and the lives that the disconnected life of, well, the well-intentioned, perfectly nice human rights lawyer who picks up Perrier water and wine from the store and then goes to this bar. And I just, and then on the other hand, of course, you have the other characters. See, I'm giving away things. This is what happens if you talk about the film. When Gitanjali Kulkarni goes to watch a play, and that play in a hall which has, among the things that I could recognize of the Marathi plays or advertised there is a Tendulkar play, there is Ghashiram Kotwal. But you walk in with her and her family, and they're all laughing uproariously at what is essentially well, quote unquote comedy in which the Marathi Manus's masculinity is being applauded or whatever, and the North Indian migrant is being mocked as
the xenophobia.
And you feel like all of these things are of a piece, that sense of, the way that you see your neighbors' political opinions as being inflected by what they consume on TV. And it's not that, and yet how do we escape the clutches of, in some ways, what is the culture of the popular that we have around us, the way that it is produced, and in some ways that leads us, it's a kind of meta question, because it's also about, a film like Court is a film that sees all of this, and yet is it being seen? Can it be seen? What is the space in which we might allow this to be watched? Not that it's ununderstandable. I don't think it's impenetrable, but it is about the ways in which our production, our cultural production, and our cultural consumption are governed. I mean, is that something you want to, like, how do you see it as someone who's now made a...
I'll tell you, you've said something very interesting, and you've touched upon a very important point about the film. And this is the thing, when I used to do Q&As, I was often accused of being a bit closed and a bit arrogant. But the fact was that I didn't want to spell things out. For me, it's like killing the mystery and the magic of the work itself. It's a bit like, oh, actually, this is what I wanted to say. This is what I wanted to communicate. So then why did you make the film? I might as well just come up on stage and just say, oh, this is what I feel. So back then, I, sometimes deliberately tried to obfuscate or not engage in the conversation. But now I feel, now it's been 5 years and I barely remember the film. So I think I'm more comfortable, talking about it. I'll tell you what, and this again might seem a bit surprising, but there was a lot of praise for the film. And there was some criticism for the film. And for me, both of it kind of missed the point. I didn't agree with either of the perspectives. There was there were a lot of compliments, and there was there were a lot of reviews which are like, oh, this is a scathing criticism of the Indian judiciary. Oh, this film exposes the failure of the Indian judiciary. And for me, I'm like, that was not my point at all. That was not my point at all. The point was, you have to see who are the people who are inhabiting these institutions. They are people like you and me. And so if where they come from affects their judgments and their biases and how they operate. That means there is a need to reflect on how all of us are and what is the culture, as you said, that surrounds us.
Yeah.
And what are the politics of everyday life, what are the biases, and the effects of conditioning on everyday life. And it's just the same. The whole idea was to not sort of make ourselves go scot-free and absolve ourselves by saying, oh, these are the people, oh, these are the institutions, oh, these are the bureaucrats, oh, these are the politicians. But still, I feel somehow I failed in communicating that, because a lot of people, because this is one of the things, I didn't want people to feel safe and morally superior by criticizing the characters on screen.
Well, it's a challenging thing to achieve, because what you're saying demands something of an openness to insert yourself into that space.
Or bad exposition in dialogues, or very on the nose dialogues where you just say it.
No.
But yeah.
Yeah, no. But I mean, for me, it is excoriating as a film, but it is not excoriating of only the judicial system or a system. It's just of us all.
Right. Because that discourse is very boring to me. That discourse is very boring, very cliched, and very safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Us and the others.
Yeah.
We are right and they are wrong. Yeah. Or villainizing people. For me, even with the public prosecutor, I wanted to extend compassion.
Yeah.
And explore her with the same kind of empathy that you would have for a bourgeois, well-intentioned, this left-leaning lawyer, who has his limits and, does things as per his convenience. And you're right that singer who says that, it's a Brazilian street song I picked up, is supposed to be very pretentious. And for me, it was hilarious, It was not
I mean, I just feel like, because I probably might have, if I walk into a bar in Bombay, I might hear her sing and I might be totally fine with it, like it's not like one doesn't find oneself in that position. So it's hard to, so I feel like I can't be sitting in judgment on her for not singing what Narayan Kamble does, because she can't, right? And yet that space of distance and your film juxtaposing those two things is what we're talking about in some ways. Are we taking way too much time? Should we be wrapping this up? I'm thinking maybe soon. And
okay.
So I was going to ask you, I guess it's an obvious question, but it's a question about watching this film or thinking about this film 5 years after, and sort of locating the politics of the society that produced a court. It's really open-ended. I mean, how do you see it? How do you see where we've come from there? And I don't mean like how you look at your film, since you don't watch it, as we know, but the things that you were speaking of, how do you see them having traveled? Where are we 5 years later? Is that something you want to speak about?
I mean, I wouldn't like to sort of attach so much importance to the film in any way, or like, it predicted what would happen, or it is so timely and so relevant even now. Like I said, I haven't even watched it now, and I don't want to attach so much importance, because there are people who are on the ground doing real work, and there are people who are encountering real suffering because of what's happening in the country politically. It's funny, an American publication recently asked me, like, how do you see the current political scenario in the country compared to what you've shown in the film? And I said that the only difference is that the so-called invisible villains in the film had a lot more tact, and what's happening right now is really out in the open, really shameless, really tactless, and really worrying. And seems to be getting worse every day. I mean, look at us. Even in the face of a pandemic, we have the imagination and the gall to communalize,
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
virus.
We've
You
really
know,
reached
so,
some kind of nadir as far as both the communalizing and
yeah,
I was watching the film. I'd of course forgotten that in the end the police charge Narayan Kamble with UAPA. I didn't remember the
mm.
specific fact of that until I was
Yeah,
watching it again.
or this, strategy of arresting people. Like it's like classic shock doctrine kind of,
Yeah,
operation. I mean, the imagination is infinite.
yeah.
When it comes to
I mean,
destructive.
the use of supposed procedure in some ways
Yeah.
as oppression. I think that is one of the ways in which the film does indict a system. I mean, the non-system. It's like it's not the law. It's the way the law is used and
but
can
but
be.
but see, again, I had only hoped back then, for myself at least, that I want to go deeper than just laws or just certain judgments or certain arrests,
Hmm.
because you know even what's happening today in the country, or in the last 5 years or 10 years or 15 years,
Hmm.
it's not coming out of nowhere. It is stemming from people and ideologies and discourse in the society,
Absolutely.
you
Like I
know
was saying to you just before
so,
we started this conversation, things like, I mean, that is what is so powerful. The fact that each of these people we see the judge right at the end talking about, giving, I think, a nephew advice about, उसके बच्चे के बारे में कि speech therapy तो ठीक है, like therapist is all right, but have you tried numerology and have you
yeah,
given him this particular gemstone to wear and,
yeah,
try that out and that'll work. And I mean, in some ways, that discourse, the public acceptability of that as an alternative to speech therapy for a child has always existed, I guess, in this country. So it's also that it's not as if it's new, but its acceptability, I guess, out of the mouth of a judge, to be placed on record in our newspapers, and now out of the mouth of ministers, or the idea that cow urine can be proposed
yeah.
as a so the
Cure for
space
every
of
disease in the world.
the
Yeah.
space of anti-science or anti expert knowledge, that domain has only grown in the last 5 years. It just seems like it's much more out there, as with everything else. I mean, it has no, so I mean, in some ways there is a way, for me at least, watching the film had a, one forgets that 5 years ago that seemed a little bit more, खटका लगता था. अब नहीं लगता है, उसको देख के लगता है हाँ
This is how
अच्छा,
it is.
हाँ,
Mm.
that there's some shift there. I'm not sure if I'm being able to put my finger on it, but Acha, so wait, we forgot to speak about something that I've only learned in the course of having just preparing for this conversation with you, which is that apparently you had some time with Cuaron, and you have been around when Roma was being made, and then
Yeah, so basically, there's this program by Rolex called the Rolex Mentor Protege Arts Initiative,
Mm.
which is going to actually next month celebrate its 20th year anniversary. And it's one of the world's best arts initiatives. I remember back in 2011 making a note about this, that I want to be a part of this, because they get like masters from different fields. So they had like Martin Scorsese for film, they had Philip Glass for music, and Margaret Atwood. They've had like just masters from different disciplines. Uh, you know, Form a relationship, have a dialogue with an upcoming artist. So it's a very established, like a veteran artist, and a relatively younger upcoming.
and you go and
Artist.
spend time with them. You go and
Yes,
work
it's
with
a
them.
year-long program. So
Oh, I
you
see.
get to see them at work, and yeah, you get to have conversations with them. I mean, it's very open that way, how you want to go about
Right.
your year. So I got this invitation to apply for it, and I did, and somehow it was Alfonso Cuarón was the mentor. So I was like, yeah, I would love to apply for this, and somehow he chose me as his protege, and it was incredible. It was a great privilege to be on the sets of Roma, and to see him at work and to interact with him. It's the kind of gift that money can't buy. And he was really, really very open and very cool, and we are friends now. And he helped me so much with my new film, and he's still like in regular contact, and he's still helping me with the new film. So yeah, it definitely changed me as a filmmaker. I've definitely grown as a filmmaker thanks to, you know, coming in contact with him and seeing how things unfold, you know, how things are done on a big film like Roma, you know.
Right.
And what a film that turned out to be. So it was incredible.
The film that you're ready with now is something that we're all going to be looking forward to, perhaps for some time. But is there some other project that you're also thinking about? I mean, is lockdown producing productive thoughts, or is it just being?
No, I'm actually having a tough time being productive. Yeah,
like a lot
during
of
these
us.
days. Yeah, I mean, I've been overcome with lethargy, and just I end up most of my time, you know, either cooking or doing the dishes or playing PlayStation or chess or something. But yeah, I mean, I have a few ideas in mind, but I don't want to immediately rush into something because I just finished this, and my process is very obsessive. So I also want to ensure that I'm properly obsessed and inspired to give another 3 or 4 years of my life. So I'm just waiting
On
for that
average,
inspiration to strike.
each of your feature films has taken about
Yes.
4 or 5 years, or 3
Yes,
or 4.
they've taken about 3 or 4 years. Yes, even Code took around 4 years. This took about 4 years. This one took a little bit longer, but yeah, because I work very meticulously, very slowly. I take my time, and both films have been produced by Vivek, who's like the best producer in the world. So he
Right.
doesn't like
Is he acting
rush.
in this one as well?
He is in acting. He's just produced this one.
Right. Well, he's a very, very important producer to have.
He is. He is. He
Well,
is.
I think we should probably wrap up and hope that
Okay.
this conversation will make some sense to everyone else who watches it. Thank you,
I hope so too.
and
Thank you so
for
much.
joining me, Chaitanya, in this conversation. Thank you, and hopefully see you in real life at some point.
Yes, yes, it was a pleasure. Thank you. It was very entertaining, and I was not bored in the least.
Oh, I'm
bit.
glad. I am glad.
Yes, yes, it was great fun. Great fun. Thank
Wonderful.
you so much. And
Bye.
yes, I hope to see you soon in real life. Yeah.
Bye. Thanks a lot.